What's up, VHS heads? I'm Matt. Join me and my two broskies, Chris and Dave, on our movie comparison podcast, The VHS Abyss, putting two movies from the golden age of cinema against each other. Whether it's a teenage soldier head-to-head, like Red Dawn versus Toy Soldiers, or simply picking two from a back catalogue of icons of the VHS era, like Roddy Piper or Jamie Lee Curtis. Whatever link we can find between two films, we've got you covered. With facts, gaffes and plenty of laughs along the way, join us on all podcast platforms to discover who will be crowned champion of the episode. We are the VHS Abyss. Whether it's a hit or a miss, we love to reminisce.
The Murder Shelf Book Club contains disturbing content related to real-life crimes. Listener discretion is advised.
A lot of people have shaken their heads at the background on Benjamin Atkins. In fact, his is a story that can evoke quite a conflicted response. Like that last juror holdout in his case, who was quoted in the media as saying he should have gotten help, or his own defense attorney, who was characterized by at least one newspaper as citing society for all of this, and was quoted saying, "Nobody is born to kill. There are other Atkinses walking around here, and people just refuse to see it." Or perhaps like the Detroit News columnist Betty DeRamus, who said, Benjamin Atkins is not the only person to have been battered or sexually assaulted. The world is full of rape and assault victims who don't wind up in courtrooms facing multiple murder charges. From The Crack City Strangler, The Homicides of Serial Killer Benjamin Atkins by B.R. Bates. Hey, welcome to the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast. I am your host, Jill. Okay, this is episode 131 on the new true crime book, The Crack City Strangler, The Homicides of Serial Killer Benjamin Atkins. And I am thrilled to welcome B.R. Bates back to the show today. Now, you might remember we first connected when I featured her book, The Baby Doll Serial Killer, The John Eric Armstrong Homicides, back in episodes 113 to 116 in February 2025. And oh my God, what an incredible story that was. Now, before we get into the whole episode and BR, I am going to once again be participating in Creators Row at Crimecon Denver from September 5th to 7th, 2025. You can save 10% on your badge by using my code, all one word and all lowercase letters, murdershelf. Just visit www.crimecon.com/CC25 to purchase your badge. We had an incredible time over the past 2 years at Crimecon, chatting, hanging out, having a couple drinks, talking cases, and book suggestions. And I think this year's event in Denver is going to be the best yet. So stay tuned for more details as they come out. Make sure you're subscribed. And I cannot wait to see my murder bookies in Denver. So today, in my previous B.R. Bates episodes, what I didn't emphasize at the time is that the Armstrong book is the first in the Murder in Motor City series. So since then, book number 2 is out, and you absolutely have to read this one. Benjamin Atkins is kind of an unknown serial killer who doesn't really pop up in true crime conversations. I mean, when I think of Atkins, I think of the diet. So I did actually mention Benjamin Atkins in those earlier episodes. But now we have an opportunity to delve into his story and explore the devastating impact that he had on so many women's lives in Highland Park and Detroit, Michigan. Now, as summer is here, it is the perfect season for indulging in the beach, pool, and vacation. So read The Crack City Strangler. Honestly, it is a gripping book that not only immerses you in the chilling details, but it also honors the lives of the victims with accuracy, respect, and the dignity that they deserve. This essential element elevates the book beyond mere true crime, and it invites all of us to reflect deeply on the human stories behind the headlines. Now, if you remember, B.R. Bates is a native of Michigan and a seasoned author and journalist who has dedicated much of her career to exploring pop culture. She has published 12 books. She graduated from Michigan State University's accredited School of Journalism with her bachelor's, and she worked in the daily newspaper industry for 10 years before transitioning into the corporate world. During her career, she spent 5 years at the Detroit News while also pursuing various freelance writing projects. You can see her interviewed on Oxygen's Twisted Killers, Season 1, Episode 2, which focuses on the Armstrong case, as well as Season 8, Episodes 2 and 3 of The World's Most Evil Killers. I have links on my blog, so check it out at www.murdershelfbookclub.com. Okay, so blah, 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 blah. Let me welcome true crime author B.R. Bates once again to the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast. It's so good to see you.
Yes, great to be back. Thank you very much.
And we are back with another book, The Crack City Strangler, The Homicides of Benjamin Atkins.
Yep, another Detroit serial killer. Who would have thought?
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's certainly not Detroit's claim to fame. And again, just like in our last book, The Baby Doll Serial Killer with John Eric Armstrong, not a name that rolls off the tongue when you're talking about serial killers.
Right. Yeah. Tony Atkins, as people call them, although his name was Benjamin Thomas Atkins, but people kind of know him as with the Tony moniker also. He is known out there. Like if you go on Reddit, for instance, in serial killer conversations, his name will come up sometimes. I almost want to say that his name might come up more often than Armstrong's name, but he is known as a little bit more obscure serial killer. His claim to fame back when he was arrested in 1992, police believed him to be the fastest moving serial killer.
Yes.
He did kill 11 women in a span of several months that could have been as short as 6 months. We don't know exact dates for all of these women, but it could have been anywhere from 6 to 8 months that he killed the 11.
He struck me as almost a spree killer. Remember Cunanan, who wound up killing Versace down in Florida? Andrew Cunanan just went on a tear, and that was over a series of weeks and months. I really wonder, I think we're sure of the exact dates of when he actually started. We know people kind of disappeared, and then time went past before they discovered bodies. There's always seems to be that lag. Yeah, I wonder if he's straddling serial killer and spree killer.
Yeah, you do have to wonder. 3 women were discovered on the same day. They were not killed on the same day at the Monterey Motel. But that's the point that the case just really broke wide open and police realized, hey, we do actually have a serial killer. They sort of had been denying it up until that point. They really didn't want to tell the public, for one thing, and they really didn't even want to admit it to themselves, I think, leading up to that they actually had a serial killer on the loose.
Yeah, I think so. Why don't you talk a little bit about his MO, how he went about committing these crimes? They're brutal. They're horrible. I mean, I don't want to get into necessarily all the graphic detail, but how would you describe his MO?
His MO, he did have a pattern that he kept repeating, and he elaborated on this with police and with the psychiatrist/psychologist who evaluated him between the time of his arrest in August 1992 and his trial, which began in January 1994. So he talked about a pattern. He lived by a pattern. And the pattern involved drugs. It involved living homeless on the street. He would describe a day in his life like, okay, he sleeps till maybe noon. He gets up, he grabs something to eat, he shoots some basketball. He then later on in the day, maybe he'd take a nap or something, but in the evening he would go out, he would score some drugs. And he would actually be scoring the money for drugs by working prostitution. And he was selling his body to get money to buy the drugs. He was prostituting himself with men. And then he would get the money. He'd go to a crack house. He'd buy some crack. Crack was his drug of choice, although he did do other drugs in his earlier years, in his teenage years. And he was only 23 when he was arrested. So this is a young life we're talking about. But yeah, the pattern involved going out to a crack house, getting some drugs. When he was high, that seemed to be when the other behavior would kick in. And he did claim after his arrest to hear voices. And he claimed that one of his alternate personalities or voices that he would hear in his head, his name was Tony, hence the Tony moniker. Tony would egg him on and berate him for his behavior on the street, for selling himself to men, berate him for homosexual activity or behavior. And Tony Atkins claimed was the one who egged him on to find a female, be a man, find a female, and then to actually kill that female. That's how he came to kill these females, he claimed, was with this voice of Tony in his head. And so at that point, he'd be almost trying to walk off the drugs too, but he would find a female. It wasn't hard on Woodward Avenue, and probably even to this day, to find a female sex worker. And often it would be someone who he had seen around or who had seen him around. It was a pretty small area there on Woodward Ave in Highland Park in Detroit. And so a lot of people would see each other on a daily basis, and they might not know names, but they would know faces a lot of the time. And so he would approach a female and he would lure her with the idea of drugs. Hey, I just bought something. I just got a rock, or I just bought some crack. So let's go smoke somewhere. And they would find some dark corner, some abandoned building on that stretch of Woodward Ave, and they would go smoke and get high. And that's when things turned bad. And he would strangle them. He would rape them, and he would kill them. Often he would start strangling them. They would pass out. He would rape them. They would start to wake up. Not to get too graphic, but this was a pattern he repeated. And then he eventually made very sure he left them dead before he tried to hide them and leave the scene. So in a nutshell, in a long explanation, that is really the pattern that he followed many, many times through those several months when he killed 11 women.
Thank you for that. And again, the speed at which he went through his victims' lives is staggering. You spend a great deal of time in the book going through his psychological evaluations, comparing the prosecution versus the defense analysis of him. And after I read through all of that and just talking about his MO, it really actually, to me, it makes perfect sense about how he went about doing this. And I know it doesn't make sense to everybody, but I'm going to look at the psychology because I can't stop myself. If Tony is probably his street moniker, but also he says he's got this person in his head that he's talking to. No, I don't think he's schizophrenic. That can happen with borderline personality disorder. Mm-hmm. And it's not so much a separate personality as it is you're almost talking to yourself. It's like a split self. So you're talking to yourself, egging yourself on. It's like the cocaine takes the inhibitions away. And then he was free to act on the anger he has towards women. Even if he was gay, he wants to approach them and punish them. And I think a lot of that stems from his upbringing, which you also go brilliantly into.
Thank you. Yes, I love the psychology aspect of it as well. Definitely, that's the part that fascinates me. And there were 4 different psychologists who evaluated him. The first one was just competency to stand trial. So there wasn't an in-depth analysis, but it did uncover some of the aspects of his childhood. And then there was the recorder's court psychologist, then the psychologist for the prosecution, and the psychologist for the defense. So everybody took a turn at him. And the story got deeper as all of these analyses unfolded in those months leading up to his trial in early 1994. And it was very, very fascinating. Yes, they say John Douglas, I'm thinking of in particular, who has studied serial killers in great depth. John Douglas has said in at least one of his books that I have read that a lot of these serial killers have mommy issues. And here is one where you have mommy issues to the 10th degree. It was said by cops who were working the case that Benjamin Atkins was killing his mother over and over and over with these women. He looked for her demographic. He looked for her skin tone. He looked for her line of work. He looked for her drug addiction. These women matched the aspects of his mom, unfortunately. And so, yeah, there's that whole psychological exploration. And getting back to what you were saying about the voices, and it's not quite a split personality, absolutely correct, because it was the psychologist for the defense, the final of the 4 psychologists who evaluated him right before his trial, Dr. Abrams. And he said that this was not a legally insane person. That was one important part of his analysis, because that was something the defense attorney had hired him for, to know what way to approach this defense. But the doctor said that it wasn't actually split personality. He called it splitting. And it's much like, what you were saying is how he described it, in that not an alternate personality, some part of himself, I guess, that he's talking to or attributing certain things to. And I don't even understand it all myself, being an amateur student of psychology, but it is very, very fascinating what was actually going on in his head, because, of course, the $1 million question, you think, was he just faking it all?
Yes.
In making up this Tony, it wasn't just Tony as an alternate personality or a voice that he said he heard in his head. There were 2 other voices in his head that he called Mary and Mayola, and they each had a different personality. They even had physical characteristics that he described to the doctors. Physical characteristics. And so you have to wonder, was this really malingering, or was he seeing something? We honestly don't know, and I don't even know where I stand on all of that.
I think a little bit of A and a little bit of B.
Okay.
I do think the women in his head may have represented his mom, his grandmother, those aspects of him. Maybe I'm odd, but I do this all the time. My internal monologue, I'm always thinking to myself. And if I'm trying to do something that's difficult, usually it's going to be dealing with some kind of technological something that's gone haywire. I'll be, come on, Jill, you can do this. You have a master's degree. You can figure this out. Come on. And I'm prompting myself. Now, that's not a person in my head I've called Agnes or something. It's definitely me, not in the first person, urging myself to go, just focus. You got this. I think his Tony is very much like that. But I think Tony is the rage and the anger and frustration and disappointment of 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old Benji growing up. And he really wasn't in a position to express that. His mom loses custody. She's very unstable. And he's left to the system. And the system is not very good. I mean, I think it was really bad in his situation. I'm not so sure we fixed a lot of those problems today. I hope so, but I have my serious doubts.
Yeah, I don't know if it was even what happened to him, if it was even indicative of the time so much as it was just what happens to an inner city kid a lot of the time. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if that kind of stuff is still not the norm, but just prevalent. The system failed him. Clearly the system failed him. And that's why he gets such a conflicted response from people. Anybody who's commented on this case online doesn't quite know what to feel about Benjamin Atkins because his childhood was so terrible. But yeah, getting back to his mom did lose custody, as you said. She was very admittedly, the defense attorney told me she was pretty honest at the time of the case. She was honest about the person that she was during Benjamin's upbringing. She was addicted to heroin and she was doing sex work. And she was often absent. And so Benjamin and his brother, who was just 1 year older, were left to their own devices, even as little kids. And finally, somebody in authority realized this and made them wards of the county, the government. And that's when they went into the foster system. And it's hard to reconcile. I think this comes into it too. He loved his mother very much. But like you said, rage at what happened to him. And his mother is at the core of it. Rage at his mother, but maybe unable to express that. And still loving his mother and wanting to be with his mother so much. So, wow. I mean, could you even be surprised that that manifested in some kind of behavioral disorder?
Absolutely. You know, she lost custody, but gosh, is this a good thing or a bad thing? She did do visitation. She promised them she was getting it together. I'm going to get an apartment. I just got engaged. I'm getting married. It's going to be better. I'm coming to get you. Oh, we broke up. I'm back on drugs. I'm not coming to get. That fits and starts with her. Kept Benji and his brother in a quicksand, in complete instability, uncertainty, getting their hopes up. Okay, mom's coming to get us. Yeah, we're going to see her. This will be great. And no. And it didn't happen. That push and pull, that instability for kids, that not having a firm footing anywhere, dangling the hope that he's going to be with his beloved mom. And that is the heartbreak. Oh my God. Reading that just absolutely wrenched my heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, like I said, people don't know when they hear his story whether to feel sorry for him or hate him for the crimes that he committed.
I feel sorry for that child who went through that. At one point, he does move in with his mom, and she's with an abusive partner who's abusing him and his brother. I mean, just being jerked around like that. And we wonder why he's furious and that's going to start erupting when he's, 22, 23 years old. I think the probability of that happening was great. Because where was he going to express the anger? He didn't really have an outlet.
Right. And his life was not going well anyways. When he became an adult, he was homeless. Sometimes he would stay with his brother. And he did have jobs at different times. He worked at a couple different pizza parlors. He handed out flyers, reportedly, the newspaper said at the time of the case. So he did have paying jobs off and on. Police and prosecuting attorney talked to his manager at the pizza place. And yeah, he worked there for several weeks, but there were problems with his employment there. Sometimes he would just not show up or whatever. So very unstable overall. And so to try to build some kind of stable life, and like even becoming an adult and separating yourself to a certain extent from whatever trauma you had as a child. But when you're an adult, you have the power to make your own decisions. You have the power to make your own life. Everyone has the power to make his own life. Even at that point, maybe because he had never had a firm foundation, he struggled so much to get any kind of stability in his adulthood. He never had his own place to live. Like I said, he crashed on his brother's couch for a time, but largely lived in abandoned buildings. And so if you've got anger that's already been boiling for years and years, and you just can't seem to get ahead at all, you just can't even seem to get any kind of decent situation in your adulthood, it would seem that would feed into even more anger.
Yeah, I totally agree. Absolutely. His choice of victims. You were talking about how they would kind of see each other in the neighborhood. You'd see someone in this group or that group. You weren't personally introduced. There's a familiarity there. So you're not necessarily talking with a stranger, just someone you haven't met yet. And I think he used that to his advantage too.
Yep. In the case of Darlene, That's a good example. Darlene was attacked by Atkins in fall 1991. And she started off really inadvertently, this whole crime spree, but she survived. She was the known survivor at the time of the case. So Darlene is somebody who had known Tony, in quotes, for several years, at least a few years on Woodward Avenue, had seen him everywhere, had gone to the same crack houses with him all the time, walking around, whatever, because she was out there. And Darlene is somebody who, because she had been doing this for a while, she actually would normally carry razor blades with her. That was a little bit of defense for her, a little bit of sense of protection for her. So she would have sometimes even razor blades in her hands as people would approach her on the street or whatever. But with Tony, no razor blades that day that she encountered Tony, because Tony was somebody she knew. She did not feel threatened by him at all. And I think, to tell you the truth, it was never stated by anybody, but I would surmise that because these girls were seeing him, they were aware. Because if you're out there, you're aware of what's going on. If you're seeing people, you're aware of what's what and who's who and where's where. And I am sure that these girls saw that he was doing sex work himself. And he was doing sex work with men. So they're like, okay, that made him even less of a threat. He was just interested. He's just going to go find a man somewhere. He's not interested in me. I don't have to worry. And even at the time that these women were beginning to be discovered and it was beginning to be felt in the air around there that maybe there was one person who was killing these women, an actual serial killer, I think even then probably these girls wouldn't have suspected him because of what he was doing. No, he's out there like me trying to make money.
He's one of them.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And he had a conversation with police one time when he was questioned before his arrest, when he was just questioned. I think it was during the conversation in January 1992 when he was found sleeping in an abandoned building when police were making a sweep of abandoned buildings because they were starting to discover these women. And so they were starting to look more closely at some of these structures that were empty. And they found Atkins sleeping in one of the buildings, and they rounded him up, took him down to the station, asked him a few questions, and they released him. But I think it was that conversation where he told somebody about this friend of his who was a sex worker like him, but a girl. And he said, yeah, she's worried about this killer roaming around. And she said, when you see me out there, Tony, keep an eye on me, okay? Because I don't feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, how twisted is that?
See, do I think it was premeditated? I kind of do. Because of that kind of thing right there.
Mm-hmm.
Tony, I'm scared, keep an eye on me, got my back here. There's some guy running around killing people. And he's like, yeah, I got your back. He knew what he was doing. Maybe not the first one, but he knew what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
He needed an outlet for the rage. Mm-hmm. Now, he was holding himself together when he wasn't high. But once the barricade came down, his inhibitions were released. There you go. I don't think he killed everybody he went off to smoke with.
I don't think so either. I think he had a lot of casual encounters where, I'm sure everybody on the street in that situation, if they're just scoring drugs, even if they're not doing sex work, but they're just scoring drugs, they're going to go smoke with somebody. They're going to go do something with somebody. It's just the culture of that. Even people who, after his arrest, after he was identified and arrested and it was blasted across the newspapers, then the media swarmed in on anybody who knew him, anybody who had ever met the guy, anybody at the pizza place, or anybody who lived in the same building with his brother where he stayed. And in particular, the people who lived like upstairs or downstairs from his brother and would see him coming and going and would chat with him. They told the media that he seemed like a really nice guy. There was a lady who told one of the newspapers that Atkins would even run errands for her now and then, go to the store and get her something. And they did say, at least one of them said, he was perfectly fine until he started doing those drugs. And then he became like somebody else. And there were multiple people who said that in different contexts, that he became a sort of different person when he started the crack.
Yeah. How many times? It's a cliche. How many times have we heard, oh, the serial killer, he was such a nice guy. He was
Definitely
so
with
helpful.
Armstrong. Yeah, definitely. Armstrong was the boy next door. I mean, that it just always blows my mind.
Yes, exactly. You did a great job in the book also comparing his type of serial killer. Well, first, what type of serial killer he was, because I love that. It's like you did it personally for me, you see. And my mind is telling me, see, Jill, this is for you.
Right.
But the type of serial killer that he is, and then comparing and contrasting with other serial killers that also had a similar victimology, mommy issues, killing prostitutes. I mean, unfortunately, that is not rare when you're talking about serial killers, that they are going after the most vulnerable in our society who will go off alone with someone. That's a big target.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the most telling things that Atkins said to police after his arrest, in the midst of all of these confessions he was making for these 11 women, and he did confess the assault on Darlene, the last victim, and this was the end of May 1992, and we know that because he had to go to the hospital to be treated for stitches. She got him in the scuffle. Her name was Cece. And as he's talking about this last victim that police didn't know about, he gave them that victim. He said, well, there's one you haven't found yet. And so they went out that day and they discovered her in a garage off Woodward Ave. But I think the most telling thing he ever said in any of those confessions is that Cece, he knew her. He had seen her around. And when he picked her up that night and they went off and started smoking together, he said, why are you out here, Cece? And to me, that was him. He had even said before to the psychologist later, he said, sometimes he wanted to talk to these women. But isn't that interesting? He wanted a little bit of insight from her. Why are you out here? He knew why he was out there. He was out there to get money. But I think he wondered, why did my mom do that to me? Why was my mom? And he honestly wanted to know from these women. He wanted to talk to them, and he asked Cece that. And it's chilling to think about, but I think it reveals a lot about where his head was.
Yeah, I think that's very, very true. Circle back to it. He had mommy issues. It sounds so simple, and yet it's not. His is such a complicated psychology. He is not a psychopath. You talk about how he couldn't experience pleasure or love, that those emotions were just kind of blocked. And they were. That's what he was taught. I love my mom so much, and she's hurt me so much. Love hurts. Therefore, I'm not going to feel that.
I think the thing that his defense attorney, Jeffrey Edison, was most offended by in the course of preparing this case for trial was that the psychologist hired for the prosecution after assessing Benjamin Atkins said that he did not have the capacity to love. And Jeffrey Edison he said, it blew my mind when he said that, but it really sounds like it deeply offended him. Like he was not going to believe that any way, shape, or form. And that's interesting, too, because I do believe when you look at the little boy, Benjamin Atkins, at the home for boys, when his mom sometimes visited and sometimes did not, as you mentioned, that was a boy who loved his mother very much.
Yes, I believe that as well. But I think when you're unfortunately jerked around like that, it became too emotionally painful. That faucet was turned off. We're just not going to go there. There's no doubt in my mind he loved his brother. He absolutely loved his brother. But unfortunately, you referenced when he was living with his brother and sleeping on the couch. That was untenable. His brother was trying to make something of himself. He did have a place to live. And Benjamin Atkins could not get himself together. He did not have those tools, and he makes him leave. And that, I think that had something to do with his girlfriend as well, the brother's girlfriend, saying, I can't have this guy on my couch. I can't. So you have this person he loves, and again, another woman making sure he gets booted out. And it's not long after that come the first murders, right?
Yeah, that was explored as a possible trigger, him being kicked out of his brother's place. And it is a possible trigger. We really don't know what the trigger was to his actually crossing the line and even just attacking Darlene. There was another person he attacked the year before in December 1990, but it was not as violent as an attack. And I see that as a little bit more casual encounter with some violence thrown in at the end of it, but not as, fortunately, that gal did not get as injured as Darlene did that day. He was definitely going to kill Darlene. And he tried very, very hard to kill Darlene. But as far as kicking off that whole thing, yeah, a possible trigger is his brother kicking him out of his home, but we just don't know the timing of that. Atkins was really not good with times and dates and all of that. So when he said that his brother kicked him out, doesn't necessarily match the time frame that the crimes began.
But remember, psychologically, the actual date on the calendar is irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
He thinks that it happened like this. And that is what you're going to internally work with. Kids will misinterpret things. Adults do this all the time. We misinterpret things. So the actual date there might not be as important as what he believes, that he got kicked out. My brother, my partner, we went through this together. We both grew up with mom. We were a year apart in age. And you threw me out too. I see it as definitely a possible trigger, may be too strong, but just that was it. It tipped, the cart went over. You know, he had a couple practice runs, I guess, where he is lashing out violently. He decided, I'm going to kill Darlene. This is going to happen. And she fortunately got away from him. The escalating is starting to kick in. I'm going to kill her. I'm going to kill her. I'm going to vent this.
Yeah. And one thing that people do not know is that his very first assault may have happened when he was a little kid at the home for boys. Because I spoke with a boy who, now grown up, who was there at the same time and encountered him several times. And that's where the name Benji came into, because that's how he was known at the home for boys. And this boy said that there were several incidents of abuse with this boy and Benji, this boy being the victim of Benji because Benji was a little bit older. So if you think of it in that perspective, like he was already desensitized, maybe you would say, to violent encounters at such a young age. Just already, he was between the age of 10 and 12. He lived 2 years at the home for boys. So he went in when he was just about 10 years old and was there till he was about 12. So that's really young. And then, the survivor who encountered him in December 1990, you could say even from that point, he escalated after that to where with Darlene about 10 months later, it was a more violent encounter.
Yeah, the level of violence is definitely kicking up. He absolutely knows what he's doing at this point. And he made sure that they were dead.
Mm-hmm. And he tried to hide them too. He was trying to get away with all this. Some serial killers seem to want to be caught subconsciously. Armstrong is an example. But Benjamin Atkins was planning on getting away with all this stuff for a long time. And he really made a lot of effort to get away with it. So yes, made sure they were dead. And he told police so that they couldn't turn me in. That was why he killed them, which is another weird aspect too. Like, did he only kill them because he just didn't want to be caught? No, I think he really meant to kill them. So there's that too. But he repeated the same pattern over and over. He was not insane because he was very methodical about that. That was another aspect that was brought up at trial.
Yes.
But there was a sense of planning too, that he kept repeating this pattern over and over and over. But yes, he definitely hid them and intended to get away with all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. He found his methodology and it worked. They talk about how serial killers fantasize. I don't think he was fantasizing. I think this was a rage outlet. I don't think he had this, Tony and he were having this conversation in his head about how glorious this was going to be. He's not that kind of serial killer. Question whether he was, power hungry and a control freak or if he was on a mission. I think he's very much on a mission.
To kill his mom.
Yeah. Yep. It was about I'm killing my mom. They are mom substitutes. I think you are right. I think he would have gone on, until he got caught. And he did not. He hid the bodies. He made sure they were not easily found under mattresses and, cubby holes and all kinds of places to stick them. and moved on to the next one. Didn't you say there were like 320 abandoned buildings that needed to be torn down?
Yep. This case, there were plenty of places to leave them. This case really highlighted the idea of abandoned buildings in this tiny little enclave of Detroit called Highland Park, and then Detroit itself. They both had a lot of abandoned buildings. They both had a lot of rundown areas. But yeah, he slept in these abandoned buildings, and it was very convenient to leave these women at abandoned buildings once they had finished smoking and he had finished his thing.
Yes. Is there anything else that you want to say about the book?
Other aspects of, and I think even the psychology of Benjamin Atkins that I'm sure are left to the interpretation of the reader, and I'm always interested in hearing anybody's thoughts. They're always welcome to email me their own thoughts, because the psychology of all of this is something that requires unpacking a lot of different details. There's just so much stuff to it that it really is an interesting question, and everyone can have their own interpretation. But I do a blog too that I introduced some other aspects that we weren't able to include in the book. Like, for instance, photos. There were some letters that Atkins wrote to his brother's girlfriend while he was in jail in that time between his arrest and his trial. I find those letters fascinating. I was only able to run a couple photos in the book, but that's one good usage, I think, of this blog, is to explore that whole area, which I think there's a lot of stuff there to explore. What he wrote to his brother's girlfriend. Getting back to a little bit what we were talking about with him getting kicked out of his brother's place as a possible trigger. When he was a little boy and he went to the home for boys, the caseworkers, when they would talk with him, made notes in their reports that he idealized his mom and his brother and himself together. And even a psychologist who evaluated him later said the same thing. He saw himself, his brother, and his mom as the ideal, the three of them together against the world. That was his family. That was his core. And the fact that that had been broken up, I think, always bothered him, always left him, disjointed in a certain way. And so when he lived with his brother, even though his mom was off somewhere else, she was around, but he never saw her. But his brother's girlfriend, he felt very close to. Mm-hmm. And that was an interesting relationship. His brother's girlfriend has since passed. She died in more recent years of an illness. But when she was around, I almost have to wonder if she was like the substitute third part of that three-part family. And then he began to see his brother's girlfriend, and himself as that unit. And that would support the idea that maybe getting kicked out of that environment was a trigger for him. So there's going to be a blog post coming up. I think I got it scheduled for September. Maybe I can move it around on the schedule, because I do find it very interesting, where I'm going to show all of those different letters that he wrote to his brother's girlfriend. And it really sheds a lot of light. I guess, in short, look for that blog to explore that.
Yes. Where can we find your blog?
The blog itself, my website is at brbates.com. But the blog itself, br-bates.blogspot.com. That's my blog. And if you Google from the keyboard of BR Bates, it will come up as well. But it's, br-bates.blogspot.com. And I introduced a lot of photos that we weren't able to include in the book because of space constraints. And so there's a lot of good stuff on there, color photos of cops who worked the case. And I think I'm going to bring out probably a few of the files too. I find the sketches of the crime scenes interesting, and maybe a little bit of the police reporting too, something that would be interesting, but not too much.
Well, I will definitely put links on my blog so that people can find your blog. And I think that will help. But I would be fascinated at seeing these letters and really get into statement analysis and how did he phrase this? What words did he use? The ones in the book were fascinating. And I think you are exactly right that in his mind, he recreated that trio. I think you're absolutely right. I hadn't thought of that. And I think spot on. Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, you missed your calling as a therapist.
Well, that was my secondary choice of occupation. If I did not go into the newspaper industry, did not become a writer, I did take a couple courses in psychology in high school and college, and I did always consider that my second choice. So yes, very much an interest.
What's next? Because now we have Murder City.
Murders in the Motor City.
Murders in the Motor City. Yes.
What press? Yes.
What's happening next?
Well, I'm not sure yet. I'm adopting a wait and see approach on these books, but there's at least one other case I'm very much interested in. I have a colleague from my time at the Detroit News who is also interested in writing a book on this case and may still do that. But if he does not, I may want to take that one on. It is an unsolved case, another serial killer in Detroit. So that's a possibility. But the short answer is I'm going to wait and see because, this is really, really time consuming. I love the work, but, I just want to see how it's received, of course,
Hey, I absolutely understand that. I get it. There's also a lot always going on with true crime.
Mm-hmm.
But I think these cases that we're not as familiar with, I think they're golden.
Mm-hmm. I really do look at it as not so much creating a bestseller, which, it's hard to do that. There's a lot of writers that toil away in relative obscurity. Not everybody pens a book and it becomes an instant bestseller. So I don't look at it that way. I look at it as preserving history. I am the one who took all the files of this case and I put them in a book form so that it would be there and we would always have it.
The files, I just remembered this. They were scattered in a building.
Lost. They were lost.
Oh,
yeah,
my
they
God.
were the Highland Park files. Now, the case did involve two different jurisdictions. Detroit still had their files. Detroit was the locale of 3 of the 11 murders, and then the other 8 were in Highland Park. So Detroit had files from their 3. But the 8 in Highland Park, the official police files were lost. They were left behind in a building when the police changed location. They moved location from one building to another. And so they were left behind and lost. And that includes even physical evidence like vials of blood and things like that. It was kind of crazy. But luckily, I was able to find, through the graciousness of one of the people I interviewed for the book, they had their own copy of the files that I was able to use. So I still got the Highland Park stuff. But that's another crazy aspect of this case in terms of the abandoned buildings. I mean, just crazy.
Yes, that absolutely blew my mind. Vials of blood.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there you are. Thank you for coming back and visiting with us on the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast. I am going to encourage all of my murder bookies to go out and buy this book. Do you have a preferred place to buy it?
Well, you can always find information on the book on the Wild Blue Press website, wildbluepress.com. Really anywhere. Amazon seems to be the go-to for a lot of people. I mean, I love the idea that you can go on Amazon and buy a book and a pair of socks at any time of day, 24 hours, and then it's going to arrive pretty soon on your doorstep. So, but really it should be available in lots of places online. So wherever.
We've got nice weather finally coming in and it's perfect to read by the pool on vacation.
I will point out one more thing, talking about Amazon, though, one real quick note that the photo on the cover of the book is genuinely a photo of Benjamin Atkins. And this is a point of contention. There were people who came in and stated in their reviews on Amazon that I was using the wrong photo on the cover. And it is a little frustrating because there has been a wrong photo of Atkins that's been out there circulating for years. And people think that that's what he actually looks like, that prison photo. But it's not the same person. It's a different Benjamin Atkins from Florida, evidently. The photo that you see in other podcasts before this year, prior historical podcasts, that photo is not actually Benjamin Atkins. And the one that's on the book is truly this killer. Trust me.
Okay. You have heard it from literally the author's mouth. The photo is legit the Benjamin Atkins we are talking about. Okay, so we've set the record straight there.
Yes, yes. I did a blog post about that too. When I saw those reviews, I'm like, oh my gosh, because this photo that I used on the book is actually one taken by Detroit police when they had him in custody in January of that year, January 1992, and they just questioned him and released him. They took that photo, and it's clearly marked in the files that I obtained by Freedom of Information Act request that that is Benjamin Atkins, because it's the case files of Atkins anyways, but it clearly is his photos.
I have not posted my review yet on Amazon, Goodreads, and all the places that I post. So I'm going to definitely make sure that I mention. And by the way...
Oh, bless you, bless you. Some of us were born and lived before the internet came along, and we don't always believe everything we see on the internet. So sometimes you get the wrong photo of somebody circulating for years before you realize it's the wrong photo.
Well, BR, thank you. It's just always a delight to talk to you. I have such a good time during our conversations.
Oh, it's wonderful. You are a great podcaster. I highly recommend you too.
Thank you so much. You are welcome back every time.
Oh, wonderful. I appreciate that.
Okay, Murder Bookies, you have heard from the author herself, and I am telling you, I keep saying this, I'm sorry, but it's so true, that The Crack City Strangler is a must-read. I appreciate B.R. Bates's empathy in addressing these complicated cases, and she bravely examines the societal pressures and neglect that led to Benjamin Atkins making the harrowing choice to murder again and again. I love how she incorporated the psychology, as you heard. And once again, she allows us to draw our own conclusions about this monstrous behavior and how the crime unfolded. So while I've shared my opinions, I always want to hear yours. I do want a moment to remember the victims, including survivor Darlene Saunders, Debbie Allen Friday, Bertha Jean Mason, Patricia Cannon George, Vicky Truelove, Valerie Chalk, Juanita Hardy, Brenda Mitchell, Vicky Beasley Brown, Joanne O'Rourke, Oceana Waymer, an unknown female victim. Murder Bookies, I see you as you hear me. I will be in Aurora, Colorado soon because I will be on Creators Row for Crimecon 2025 Denver, just weeks out. I will be at the Embers Lodge Bar Friday night at 9 p.m., and I'll be posting updates on Patreon. Now, if you still need a Crimecon badge, use my code, one word, all lowercase letters, murdershelf, and go to www.crimecon.com/CC25 and save yourself 10%. Part 2, Ultraception on a Dark Night in Aurora by Dr. William H. Reed. James Holmes continues therapy, but his mental health continues to worsen with him not sharing his plans with his therapist, which will be out in a week. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything and it just pops into your feed. And here comes the announcement. Thanks to my amazing supporters on Patreon, our next book is A Tangled Web, a cyber stalking, a deadly obsession, and the twisting path to justice by Leslie Rule. So on a bleak, chilly November day in 2012, 37-year-old Carrie Farver vanished without a trace from her life in Omaha, Nebraska. Shocking everyone, she quit her job and left her young son behind, igniting a firestorm of concern and speculation. Yet her mother, Nancy Rainey, steadfastly refused to accept that her daughter had simply walked away from everything she loved. Brace yourself for one of the most intricate and bewildering true crime stories I have ever encountered. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the best true crime books and cases. If you enjoyed the podcast, please share it and leave a 5-star review on the platform where you listen. You can contact me at jill@murdershelfbookclub.com or connect with me on X, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Additionally, you can join my Patreon for just $4 a month and help choose the next book I'm going to feature. Stay safe and trust your gut.
Welcome to Camp Cringe, streaming on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
The school bus arrives at Camp Sawiki Wiki for its annual summer camp.
What the hell is your problem, lady? Do you need something, or are you just trying to ruin my vibe?
My name is Tony. Are you hurt?
You kids shouldn't be out here playing with fire.
Does anyone else see that creepy lady following Nevea? Or is it just me?
Yo, what is that noise?
Remember, God is watching.
Welcome to Camp Cringe, man. We're so screwed.
New episodes every 25th of the month.
There was a question here. Oh, give me a minute. God bless editing. It is just magic, because this is not
I love
happening at all.
editing.
Written and produced by Jill, all rights reserved. Music, The Pewter Elephant by Blue Dot Sessions.